Hey everyone, and welcome to the Climate Career Kit podcast. This is your host, Aishani Garg. If you are a high schooler looking for direction in climate change related careers, tune in to every episode for advice from the diverse leaders in climate jobs today and learn about new and exciting opportunities that you can pursue. Today's guest is Michele Turner, who is heavily involved in product management. We are so excited to have you for the 11th episode of the Climate Career Kit. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Shani, thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
So to jump right in, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what a day-to-day looks like for you?
Sure. So for the last, a couple of decades, I've been doing product management in a variety of roles. And what product management really is helping to figure out on any product, like what is the purpose of the product? What's the value that it brings to the consumer? And then what's the best way to build that, whether you to get the best quality, the best return on investment. You got to make sure that it doesn't cost too much money. You have to make sure that what you're building is actually solving a problem that's a big enough problem that enough people will want to buy it and the company can make money off of it. But I think at the core of it, it's really figuring out what's the problem that you want to solve and what's the best way to solve that problem in terms of building a product related to it.
And I know that some people, including myself, don't know too much about the difference between your job and a project manager. Can you tell us a little bit about that difference?
Sure. Project managers and product managers work really closely together, and there is some overlap in our roles. But a product manager focuses a little bit more on defining what the product is going to be. So let's take something like the Nest thermostat, which, by the way, I was not the product manager on, but I worked at Nest for several years as it was acquired by Google, and I'm familiar with that one. And a lot of folks probably know that. So, Tony Fadell actually, I would say, was kind of the chief product owner of that initially. And he had a problem when he had just built a house and it was up in Tahoe, and he didn't have a way to remotely control the heat on his house. And he had built this beautiful house, and he thought that the existing thermostats were ugly. So he wanted to go build something that was beautiful. And he wanted to build something that could be controlled by his phone, so that on his way up to his Tahoe house from the Bay Area, he could heat the house up and have it warm and toasty for when they arrived, but didn't have to run the heat the whole time when it was empty, because that is not very green, it's not efficient, and it's very expensive. And so Tony figured out, okay, what's the problem that I want to solve, which is I want a beautiful thermostat that I can control remotely. Is the market big enough for that? And went on from there to really define, okay, what is this actual product that we want to build? How are we going to build it? What are the technical specifications behind it? And he worked with engineers. And of course, Tony is even better known for being the father of the iPod. So he's been doing this for a long time, and one of the fathers of the iPhone. And so, but thinking through what are the problems that you need to solve for the customer, and then working with engineering and design and marketing and finance and everybody to say, how do you bring all of this together and to get the product out the door and actually deliver this product into the market? A project manager is really essential into that and is one of the players on that, but does less work in actually defining the product, and does a little bit more work on coordinating between the various teams. So engineering, design, product management, everybody, to say, hey, we've got this schedule that we've got to hit. Is everybody aligned to be able to hit their different milestones on time, maintains that schedule, works with operations to figure out the supply chain and the manufacturing timelines that are due, works to understand what the launch timelines are, and really keeps all of those different teams. And in a bigger company, they can be hundreds of people, but even in a smaller company, you've got maybe 30 people that you're trying to line up around this product, making sure that they're all aligned and getting their deliverables out on time. There is overlap in terms of that roadmap and that timing that always happens between project managers and product managers, and that's where they work really closely. A lot of times a project manager will come up and go, hey, product manager, there is no way you're going to hit your delivery date unless something gets cut. And the product manager has to go back and say, okay, there are some features that are in here that I'm going to have to cut. By the way, I hate doing that. But what is it that I am going to have to cut in order to make the schedule? So that's it's very collaborative, and that's how they work together a lot.
Oh, okay. So how does your job, or how has your job in the past intersected with sustainability?
So I would have to say I didn't really start getting a taste of sustainability until I joined Nest. And that was almost 8 years ago. And at that point, I was running software product management for Tony at Nest, and we were at that point part of Google. And you know, we were in the middle of the smart home space, and I would say smart home in general can help with sustainability because it allows you to put things on a schedule remotely and control a lot of these devices via your phone or your voice. And so, but where I really got my first taste of how the Nest thermostat itself could help with sustainability was we were working on software projects that allowed us to work with utilities, big utilities, on the timing of by allowing them to actually control the thermostats during grid events. And some of you may remember, like when it got really hot, actually, for those of you in California, which I think most folks are, last summer, we had a really big grid event, and the state said, hey, can you guys, everybody just shut their air conditioning down for the next hour. And miraculously, millions of people across California did, and we averted a grid alert. Well, Nest was working with utility companies, particularly in Texas, which for those of you who are really into sustainability, they have a deregulated energy market. It's both good and bad. And we were working with them on helping those energy companies use Nest thermostats to be able to move remotely the thermostat. And this is all okay with the customer. The customer said, hey, yes, I'm okay with you doing this. You always want to make sure that you don't do things on behalf of the customer that they don't know that you're doing, because that's bad. They don't like that. But can you move, if it was in the middle of summer and they were having a heat event, be able to reduce the air conditioning by like 2 degrees. And if you do that for, thousands of customers on your grid, all of a sudden you can lower the grid impact enough that they don't have to start going to a less efficient and possibly more polluting type of energy to burn, and their grid costs go down. And so that was my first exposure to that. And then we did a project which was designed to make Nest thermostats work with time of use programs. And for those of you in the Bay Area whose parents are paying a PG&E bill, if you're not familiar with time of use programs, basically means that, from about 3 p.m. till 11 at night, your energy costs a whole lot more than it does at 2 a.m. And so if you've got an EV, you want to make sure that EV starts charging at like midnight or 1 a.m. Because those time of use plans can get really expensive. And they effectively try to manage the grid load by saying, hey, don't use your energy at this point in time. It's going to cost you more money. And so the Nest thermostats were trying to work with the TOU programs with these different utility companies to be able to reduce the grid load and make the energy less expensive for the consumer by bringing down the temperature or raising the temperature based on the time of year tied to the TOU plan. So that's where I first started getting into it. I then moved into more traditional smart home stuff. But my last role at Google was working as a Google.org fellow. I spend a bunch of my time up in Tahoe, and I live in the Bay Area, back behind Stanford. We have wildfire risk in both places pretty severely. And so I wanted to do something that could really make an impact on the environment and help reduce our wildfire risk. So we worked with the California Natural Resources Agency to build some decision support tools that help rangers and foresters be able to look at 500,000 acres of land or a couple million acres of land and say, how do I do our best treatment to reduce wildfire risk in those areas? And now I'm starting to just investigate more into this area, and starting to work with some other companies on various that are climate related on a number of various different projects. But that's how I got into it.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to the wildfires. We all have
Yep.
experienced that at one point or another. So what exactly inspired you to pursue this career specifically? So when did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
So I had a funny intro into it. Product management is a weird role. Those of you who are looking at colleges, there's very few schools have a major in product management. And I think you can get one now, maybe from Stanford. There might be a degree path there. But in general, you've got a computer science or software engineering path, or some type of an engineering path, and you don't really have something in product management. I literally fell into it, Aishanid. I was working, actually, my degree is in finance, and I have a master's in finance. And I was working in finance, and I was bored. And I was at a pretty big name at that point in time company, and my parents were all proud of what I was doing. And I had a colleague of mine starting to say, "Hey, do you know any product managers at your company?" It was a tech company at the time called Sun Microsystems that is now no more, but you may have parents who worked there at some point. And do you have anybody, any product managers that you can refer me to, because we're hiring? And I said, no, I'm not going to poach from my own company. That would be the wrong thing to do. So after about a month, he finally said, well, you've got your MBA. How about you? I go, well, I don't know anything about product management. He goes, that's okay. Come over and talk to us. So they hired me in as a product manager for their multi-processing C and Fortran compilers. It was a company that you can look up called Silicon Graphics. And it was really one of the original graphics companies. And honestly, I had really no qualifications to do that job, but it was a really new type of role. And so we kind of made it up as we went along, is what the product managers were doing, and started to define what it meant at SGI to have software product management. They had a bunch of hardware product managers that were building the actual computers. The software side was newer. And so that's how I got in. And my advice to you, by the way, my parents thought I was insane. I was joining a much smaller company. But I was in an age where I could take that risk. It sounded like a whole lot more fun than my finance path. And I ended up staying in that role for the next 30 years. So sometimes your parents are going to think that you're crazy when you make these career jumps. And, I took a leap of faith on something that I thought looked much more interesting than the path that I had set myself out on. So I will throw that in there. Your parents may be mad at me if you go change careers on them in the, later, but it can pay off.
Yeah. So what is something you were most excited to work on?
Wow, I have worked on a whole lot of different products over the years. Um, the thing about products is that eventually, if you're in it long enough, they get deprecated. I worked on Flash when it was cool. I did help bring some of the first graphics software into the market that is still being used today, which was neat. But I think most recently, one of the most fun things that I did was actually build this decision support tool for these wildland planners. It was a really interesting project. There weren't very many of us working on it. It was it initially started as a 7-person team from Google, and we were meeting with a whole bunch of PhDs from the U.S. Forest Service and from the UC system and from the state of California. And we had to go figure out what the problem was, figure out who the users were, figure out what we needed to build, and then start getting this thing built. And we were supposed to be done in like 9 months. And it was a very much startup focused type of project. And I'm lucky enough that there's a company that's taking it on. The fellowships only run for usually 6 months. This one ran for 9. The state of California is funding another company to take what the Google.org team and the state of California have built so far, and they're going to work with another company to finish up what we started. And so I get to go do some work with that company to help finish up what it is that we began, which is really cool. So I'm super excited about that, because it's for one thing, for me, it's something we haven't never done before, but it can be so impactful. And it's really starting to apply technology to a problem that needs to be addressed at scale. And right now, there's a lot of tools. Like, a lot of the work that's done there is done by, like, I met with the Truckee Forest Rangers who, are down the road, and they know every inch, every acre of the land that they're responsible for, and they know what to do with that. But when you start extrapolating that to the whole Tahoe National Forest or El Dorado National Forest, it's a really unwieldy problem when you're trying to figure out, how do I deal with bark beetle infestation over here? How do I treat that? How do I treat some, I've got to preserve this because we've got, nesting spotted owls over here. We've got other endangered species here. So just figuring out, like, and building a tool that lets them plan in all of those different variabilities on the land is a huge challenge, but it's really exciting to be able to get that out to them. I think it's going to be super impactful. So that's the one I'm most excited about right now.
Of course, that sounds really interesting and very necessary for today's world.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for a high schooler who aspires to be a product manager?
So the first thing I would do is learn a little bit more about the role. And there's some great online resources that, just learn about what it is that we do. And I would say, if that's a path you want to go on, do look at, this is something I've advised a couple of folks. It's good to have a technical background. If you are building, there are product managers for things like washers and dryers, and there are product managers for tons of products that are not very technical. If you want to go into a technical field, and I realize I'm talking to somebody from the design tech high school right now, so a lot of your listeners are going to be in the technical, going to get down a technical field. But if you're really interested in product management, I would really look at, can you get a CS degree at more of a liberal arts school?
Mm-hmm.
Because product managers kind of sit at the middle. You have to have really good communication skills. You have to know how to write. You have to know how to process information and get that out to a broad group of people, because you're working with designers and finance people and engineers and project managers and marketing people and customers. And sometimes you're out there talking directly to your customers. So you've got to be a great communicator, good written communication skills. You got to be comfortable with preparing, Google slide decks or PowerPoint decks, right? And not all folks want to have to do that. And but other folks are like, hey, I like being able to think more broadly about what are we going to create to solve the problem instead of just how to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. And so if that's interesting for you, I would look at some of the online resources. There's a company called General Assembly that has some classes in it. You don't have to take the class now. I wouldn't recommend that, but I would really recommend just looking online at what product managers do. And then as you're looking at colleges, look at colleges that have computer science degrees, but are also in liberal arts colleges. Because I think that provides a really good balance, because the liberal arts education is going to give you that more holistic thinking around, the user and the people that you're designing the product for. If you really, if you're into the engineering piece of it, though, probably not as necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And to all the listeners, make sure to tune in to the next episode of the Climate Career Kit.